Imagine the air, thick and suffocating, heavy with the resinous smoke of burning copal and the damp breath of the jungle clinging to your skin like a second soul. The only light is the frantic flicker of torches, shadows leaping and twisting across the stone walls of a pyramid, a man-made mountain stabbing toward the stars. The jungle doesn't sleep. It growls, it whispers, a jaguar's rasp cuts the night. Insects chatter like an endless chorus. And beneath it all, the low, relentless chanting of priests vibrates not just in your ears, but deep in your bones. This is the world of the Maya, a civilization we think we know. We marvel at their flawless calendars, their towering cities, their astonishing grasp of mathematics and the stars. We paint them as serene stargazers, philosopher kings, a people of pure intellect. We wander the ruins of Chichen Itza and Tikal and imagine a golden age, frozen in stone. But that vision, the neat one shown in textbooks and documentaries, is a lie of comfort. Because etched into those same stones, hidden in their glyphs and whispered in the fractured tales of their descendants, lies another story. A truth that is raw, visceral, and to us, utterly horrifying. Before we pull back that veil and step into the heart of this forgotten world, I want you to do one thing. If you believe history isn't just kings and dates, but the raw, bloody, chaotic pulse of human life, hit that like button, subscribe, because here we don't just recite facts, we descend into shadows together. And drop a comment below. Tell me where in the world you're watching from. It never stops amazing me that we can connect from every corner of the globe, bound by this same hunger for the stories that shaped us. Now, take a breath, because what follows is not the story of peaceful astronomers. It is a story of blood, sacrifice, and a vision of sexuality so alien, so bound up with the sacred and the savage, that it will change the way you see this legendary people. The Maya believed the universe itself was born from an act of divine sex. Creation was cosmic intercourse. Their sacred text, the Popol Vuh, tells of gods who spilled their own blood to spark life. And for the Maya, this wasn't a one-time event. It was a cycle, a fire that had to be constantly renewed through human action. Creation was never passive. It was a duty, and the fuel for that cosmic engine, blood and semen. To the Maya, these were not just fluids. They were the very essence of life. Blood was the seed of the gods. Semen, the seed of man. Together, they were the ultimate offering, the direct reenactment of creation itself. This had nothing to do with pleasure, love, or romance as we know it. It was obligation. Painful, ecstatic, terrifying obligation. The line we draw between bedroom and temple simply did not exist. The body was not private. It was not yours. It was an altar. And the most sacred rituals were written in flesh and blood. Picture a noble youth, barely 16. For weeks, he has fasted, prayed, and consumed hallucinogens to open himself to the spirit world. He isn't preparing for a wedding. He's being readied for something far more brutal. On the night of the ritual, he climbs the pyramid before the gathered crowd. The chanting crescendos. The air crackles with anticipation. And he is not afraid. He is exalted, for he is about to feed the gods. The high priest, cloaked in jaguar skins and crowned in brilliant Quetzal feathers, approaches. In his hand is a weapon of devotion, a stingray spine, jagged and cruel, revered for its power to draw the sacred essence. And in a moment of unbearable ecstasy and agony, witnessed by the entire community, the boy pierces his own penis, not once, but many times. A rope, studded with thorns, is threaded through the wounds to draw forth as much blood as possible. The pain is beyond comprehension, but it is not punishment. It is transcendence. His blood drips onto bark paper, then sets aflame. Smoke rises, carrying his life force skyward, feeding the gods, ensuring the sun will rise, the rains will fall, and the corn, the very substance of life, will grow. In this moment, he is no longer just flesh. He is a conduit, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. His suffering is the price of balance. And this was no fringe act, no hidden cult ritual. It was the very heart of Maya belief, practiced by kings, nobles, and elites, those deemed closest to the gods. Their own art proves it. Carved stelae, painted ceramics, lintels. King Shield Jaguar is shown dragging a thorn-studded rope through his tongue, while his queen, Lady Zook, bleeds beside him. But for men, the most sacred offering, The ultimate act of creation came from the source itself, the penis. It was the ultimate act of returning life force to the gods, a repayment for the gift of existence itself. In Maya society, the sexual organs were not hidden in shame, but revered, displayed as sacred tools, instruments for bargaining with the universe. And what you've just heard, as shocking as it is only the beginning. It's the doorway into a world where the lines between pain, pleasure, and piety vanished completely. But what happened when this ritual wasn't performed alone, but with a partner? What role did women play in these blood-soaked acts of fertility? And what happened when the gods demanded not just blood, but the ultimate sacrifice? For Maya women, the role in this sacred theater of flesh was just as vital, and in many ways, even more complex. While men offered the seed of mankind, noble women became conduits for the blood of their divine lineage. Their bodies, like men's, were altars, but the rituals they performed carried a different, equally cosmic weight. For women, the offering came not from the organ of creation, but from the organ of speech, the tongue. Imagine Lady Yuchuk, queen of Yakshilan, a powerful figure in her own right, kneeling in a torchlit temple chamber. Her husband, the king, has just endured his agonizing act of genital perforation. Now, it is her turn. She is no passive witness. She is a participant, an equal partner in the transaction between humanity and the divine. The priestess places the sacred tool in her hands, a rope lined with the razor-sharp thorns of the sacred ceiba tree, the world tree that bound heaven, earth, and the underworld. Calmly, almost serenely, she drives the thorns through her tongue. Not a simple prick, but a deep, tearing wound. Then she threads the entire rope through it, pulling again and again until the blood pours in torrents, soaking the bark paper laid at her feet. This is not merely her blood. It is ancestral blood, divine blood, a lineage that reaches back to the gods themselves. By offering it, she reaffirms her right to rule, her sacred connection to the powers that shape existence. The pain becomes a key, unlocking visions. As the blood drips and the agony intensifies, she enters a trance, a vision quest. The bark paper is set aflame, smoke rising, curling around her in thick clouds. In that smoke, she sees the face of the vision serpent, the divine messenger, the gate to the other world. From its gaping jaws emerges the spirit of an ancestor or deity, bearing wisdom, prophecies of war, guidance for planting and harvest, secrets of the cosmos itself. Her suffering is more than sacrifice. It is communication, a bloody, brutal telephone line to the gods. This was no private ordeal. It was a public performance, proof of a queen's piety, strength, and divine legitimacy. It bound her authority to the sacred. It showed her unique power to bridge the mortal and the divine. But what of sex in the conventional sense? What about intercourse itself? For the Maya, even that was rarely private, rarely separated from cosmic obligation. Among the nobility, the timing of sex was dictated not by desire, but by the stars. The sacred 260-day calendar, the Tzolk'in, governed every part of life. Conception had to be aligned with auspicious days. To conceive a child under ill-fated stars risked birthing a cursed soul. Astrologer priests would determine the exact moments when celestial forces aligned to favor the creation of rulers and priests. Sex became a scheduled ritual, a duty performed not for pleasure, but for the state, for the cosmos itself. And the act could be ritualized as well. While public bloodletting was the most extreme display, there is evidence that sacred intercourse was also part of Maya worship. At Uxmal and other sites, temples are covered in phallic carvings, not crude graffiti, but holy symbols of fertility and creation. Some scholars believe these were centers of ritualized sex, acts of sacred prostitution, where men and women offered their bodies as channels for divine energy, ensuring the fertility of land and people. To participate was not shameful. It was sacred. Their flesh became vessels for the creative force of the gods. It was worship through the body, a rejection of any separation between spirit and flesh. But this deep connection between sex and divinity had a darker edge. If sex could channel cosmic power, it could also unleash cosmic corruption. Adultery, for instance, was not seen as a private betrayal. It was a rupture in the fabric of the sacred order, an act that endangered everyone, summoning divine wrath on the entire community. The punishments were brutal. An adulterous man could be handed over to the wronged husband, who had the right to crush his skull with a stone. A woman caught in adultery often faced death by strangulation. There was no idea of a crime against just one person. Every transgression was against the gods, against the whole community. This obsession with ritual purity extended to every act of sex. Homosexuality, for example, remains one of the most debated subjects among Mayanists. Early Spanish chroniclers, like Bishop Diego de Landa, wrote with horror about what they described as the Mayas' acceptance of same-sex practices, even claiming male brothels existed where boys were sold for sex. But we have to remember, these were 16th century Catholic men, steeped in homophobia, looking for reasons to brand the Maya as depraved. Demonizing the sexuality of conquered peoples was a convenient justification for conquest. The Maya's own record is far less clear. Some ceramic figurines do show what look like homosexual acts, but context is everything. Were these scenes from daily life, mythological episodes, or perhaps warnings against taboo behavior? We don't know. The truth is likely far more nuanced than the Spanish wanted anyone to believe. It's possible some forms of same-sex relationships were tolerated, maybe even woven into ritual practice, while others were condemned. What is undeniable is that the Maya saw sex, gender, and desire in ways completely alien to our modern categories. It was a shifting, fluid, often dangerous landscape, where any act could tip the scales toward divine favor or catastrophic wrath. This was a world where a young noble piercing his own genitals was seen as holy devotion, where a queen bleeding from her tongue could decide the fate of an empire. And sometimes their own blood wasn't enough. Sometimes the gods demanded more. Sometimes the balance of the cosmos required the ultimate price, sex and death, fused in sacrifice. That's where human sacrifice came in, the most terrifying expression of their worldview. This was not random slaughter, not mindless violence. It was deliberate, calculated, ritualized. The greatest gift mortals could give to the gods who, in Maya belief, had given their own blood to create the universe. For the Maya, existence itself rested on a sacred debt. The gods had spilled their essence to shape the world. The repayment was life force, and the most powerful form of life force was a human heart, still beating. The victims were often no ordinary people. They were elite captives, kings, nobles, war leaders, taken alive from rival cities. To sacrifice them was to seize not just a body, but their vital energy, their divine essence. Offering it to one's own gods strengthened your city, while weakening your enemies. War, for the Maya, wasn't really about land or resources. It was about capturing blood, capturing bodies destined for the altar. A successful campaign wasn't measured in territory won, but in the noble captives dragged back alive. Picture the scene, played out countless times in cities like Palenque and Tikal. A captured lord who just weeks ago commanded armies now stands stripped naked. His skin is painted blue, the color of sacrifice. He is marched onto the ball court to play one last game. But this is no contest. It is theater, a ritual reenactment of the eternal struggle between the hero twins of the Popol Vuh and the lords of Xibalba, the underworld. His defeat is inevitable. Afterward, he is dragged up the steep temple steps. Below, the crowd doesn't mourn. They erupt in frenzy, a collective ecstasy, drums pounding, flutes shrieking, voices roaring like a storm. At the summit, 4 priests painted blue seize him, bending him backward across a curved altar, his chest thrust toward the sky. Then the high priest, the Nacom, steps forward. In his hand gleams a blade of obsidian, sharper than steel. With one swift motion, he plunges it below the ribs, slices open the chest, and reaches inside. He tears free the heart, still pulsing, still steaming, and lifts it to the heavens. The lifeless body is then rolled down the pyramid steps, tumbling in a grotesque cascade of blood until it lands in a broken heap below. But sometimes, the horror did not end there. Archaeology and Maya art both suggest ritual cannibalism. The flesh of sacrificed captives, especially powerful lords, could be consumed. To eat was to absorb, to take in their strength, their spirit, their essence. It was domination and communion in one. And through all this violence, sex was never far away. Sacrifice and fertility were bound together. Blood spilled on the earth was seen as fertilizing the soil, ensuring the growth of maize, the very substance of Maya life. Even their language reveals this connection. Words for semen and maize were linked. Words for blood and the sap of trees overlapped. Life, sex, blood, sacrifice, all part of the same sacred continuum, and sometimes that link was made explicit. Maya art shows men in the act of intercourse with a goddess as they were sacrificed. Their semen and their blood released together at the instant of death. It was the ultimate collision of creation and destruction, a moment of divine ecstasy where the barriers between life and death, pain and pleasure, dissolved completely. In that instant, the victim was not just a man, he became a god. His death itself became creation, fuel to keep the universe alive. It wasn't only men who faced the altar. While male captives were the most common victims of heart sacrifice, women and children were not spared, though their deaths often took different forms. Children, seen as pure and untouched, were considered especially powerful gifts for the rain god, Shak. Many were drowned in sacred cenotes, those vast limestone sinkholes the Maya believed were gateways to the underworld. At Chichen Itza's sacred cenote alone, archaeologists have uncovered the bones of hundreds, many of them children. Their remains show they weren't locals, but brought from distant regions. Evidence of a vast system of tribute and sacrifice. Women, too, were killed in rituals tied to the moon goddess and other female deities. Some were decapitated, their skulls mounted on racks, while others were dismembered in ceremonies meant to echo mythological events. The sheer scale and variety of these rites is staggering, but for the Maya, this wasn't murder. It wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake, it was survival. In their eyes, the universe was fragile, always on the brink of collapse, and only through blood could balance be maintained. This worldview was born from the unforgiving Central American jungle, where droughts could erase a harvest overnight. Jaguars prowled the edges of villages, and the gods seemed both near and terrifyingly demanding. Their sexual and sacrificial rites, as horrifying as they appear to us, were their answer to chaos. A way to impose order, a way to play their part in the cosmic drama of creation. And, for over 1,000 years, it worked. This belief system fueled their art, their science, their wars, but it may also have sown the seeds of their downfall. The classic Maya world, from roughly 250 to 900 AD, was bound together by ritual bloodshed. It legitimized the Kuhul Ajor, the holy lords who ruled their cities. It gave meaning to life and death, but it also locked their society into an endless cycle of escalating violence. A Maya king's greatest duty wasn't ruling as an administrator. It was proving his connection to the gods through blood. His authority was written in scars carved into his own flesh and in the bodies of his enemies. If the rains failed, if the crops withered, if captives weren't taken, it meant the gods had abandoned him. His power collapsed, not from politics, but from spiritual failure. That pressure pushed kings to outdo one another in ever bloodier spectacles. Wars were waged not for land, but for prisoners destined for sacrifice. Monuments became propaganda, boasting of skull racks piled high, or rival rulers captured and offered to the gods. But this cycle wasn't sustainable. Constant warfare drained resources, stripped manpower from fields, and fueled instability. Worse, as crises mounted droughts, deforestation, overpopulation. The Maya answer wasn't less sacrifice, it was more. Later burials reveal mass killings hastily carried out, a brutal contrast to the carefully staged rituals of earlier centuries. Desperation is written in the bones. If the gods weren't satisfied, the only answer was more hearts, more blood. And this worldview didn't just weigh on kings, it shaped the lives of everyone. Farmers in their maize fields, potters at their wheels, weavers at their looms. They all shared the same sacred burden. They gave what they could, the blood of a chicken, a turkey, or a few drops of their own. Their offerings, however small, were believed to keep the cosmos alive. But they also carried the weight of supporting temple complexes, priests, and warriors. They paid tribute in crops, goods, labor, and sometimes with their own lives. It's a myth that all sacrificial victims were foreign captives. High-status enemies were prized. But in times of desperation, commoners could be chosen. Mass graves filled with men, women, and children tell that grim story. Now imagine living in a society where the rains failed, the droughts stretched longer, and the maize harvests grew smaller, yet the demands of the state and the priesthood only intensified. The rulers who were meant to uphold cosmic order were instead presiding over a world visibly unraveling. At some point, the faith that had held for 1,000 years must have begun to fracture. The old social contract that the sacrifices of the many, led by the divine king, would win the gods' favor, was breaking. The gods were eating, but the people were starving. This tension fed into what we call the classic Maya collapse. It was not one sudden disaster, but a slow and complex process. Political fragmentation, depopulation, and decline across more than a century in the southern lowlands, the very heart of classic Maya civilization. One by one, great cities were abandoned. The Maya stopped carving their elaborate stone monuments, those stelae that once glorified their divine kings. Ceremonial centers fell silent, and the jungle began its slow, relentless reclamation of everything built. But the people did not simply disappear. Many likely migrated north to Yucatan cities like Chichen Itza and Mayapan, which flourished for centuries more. Yet the political and religious system of the classic era, with its divine kings and bloody pacts with the gods, had collapsed under its own contradictions. The sexual and sacrificial practices that had once been the bedrock of their existence proved an unstable foundation. A society built on blood and pain could not hold forever. By the time the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, the Maya world was already diminished. The southern cities were swallowed by forest, and the northern kingdoms locked in petty conflicts. To the conquistadors, with their own fierce brand of religious zeal, the rituals they witnessed, bloodletting, sacrifice, were evidence of demonic corruption, a justification for conquest and forced conversion. Bishop Diego de Landa, who preserved invaluable accounts of Maya life, was also responsible for the infamous Auto da Fe at Mani in 5062, where countless codices and sacred artifacts were burned. In that fire, an irreplaceable library of knowledge and history was destroyed. De Landa sought to erase what he saw as demonic sexuality, replacing it with Catholic chastity, to abolish pagan sacrifices and substitute them with the sacrifice of the Mass. In doing so, he and others severed the Maya from the last remnants of a cosmology that had endured for millennia. A people whose faith had been inscribed on the body in blood and creation were forced into a religion written in books, one that drew sharp lines between sacred and profane, spirit and flesh. And with that, an entire universe of meaning, as intricate and magnificent as their temples, was lost beneath conquest and misunderstanding. Yet the echoes never fell completely silent. They still reverberate, hidden in plain sight, a ghostly testament to a culture that refused to be erased. To travel through the Maya lands today, Chiapas, Guatemala, Belize, the Yucatan, is to walk through a landscape haunted by this bloody and sacred past. The worldview that once demanded genital bloodletting and human hearts is gone, but its shadow lingers, fused with the very religion that tried to destroy it. The conquest did not simply replace one faith with another. It triggered a collision, a violent, creative fusion that gave birth to a new spiritual reality, uniquely Mesoamerican. The Maya, with an adaptability forged over centuries, took the saints and symbols of Catholicism and mapped them onto their own ancient cosmos. The Spanish cross, symbol of Christ's sacrifice, became for many Maya a new vision of the Khan, the world tree, axis of the universe. And Christ himself, a God who offered his own blood for humanity, resonated with a people whose deities and kings had long done the same to uphold cosmic order. In the highlands of Chiapas, in the town of San Juan Chamula, stands a church unlike any other. From the outside, a standard colonial facade. Step inside and you enter another reality. The floor is carpeted with green pine needles, echoing the sacred forest. The air is thick with candlelight, smoke, and burning copal, the same incense offered by their ancestors. Families kneel together, chanting in Tzotzil. Traditional healers move among them, guiding rituals that blend Catholic and pre-Columbian practice. Candles are lit in colors with precise symbolic meaning. Chickens are sacrificed on the floor, their life force believed to heal or protect. Worshippers drink pox, a sugarcane liquor, to open channels to the spirit world. Even Coca-Cola is consumed, not casually, but ritually, its burp seen as expelling evil spirits. This is not parody nor heresy. It is living syncretism, a testament to a worldview where the old gods never died but slipped into the masks of Catholic saints. That same syncretism still shapes how life, death, and the body are understood. The ancient belief in a vital life force, the Xulel, endures. Illness is still seen not merely as a physical problem, but as a rupture of the soul, a part of one's essence that has gone astray. Healing, among the Maya, is not just medicine, it is a ritual journey. A curandero must enter the spirit world to retrieve the lost fragments of a soul, a direct echo of the shamanic quests of their ancestors, once induced through the agony of bloodletting. The terrifying sexual rites have faded, but the deeper belief endures: the body is still a vessel of spiritual energy. The modern Maya have not forgotten. The stories of the Popol Vuh are still told. The sacred 260-day calendar is still kept by ritual specialists in highland villages, consulted to mark auspicious days for planting, marriage, and ceremony. And the ruins of their ancient cities are not empty relics. They are living shrines, places of power where offerings are left and prayers whispered to ancestors believed to still dwell among the stones. But this inheritance is not only one of spiritual survival, it is also one of trauma. The conquest was not the end. Centuries of oppression, exploitation, and outright genocide followed. The Guatemalan Civil War, from 1960 to 1996, was in many ways a continuation of that conquest. The military, often armed and funded by foreign powers, waged a campaign of terror against the indigenous Maya. Over 200,000 people were killed. Entire villages were erased. Women were systematically raped. Community leaders tortured and executed. The justifications often repeated the language of the conquistadors. The Maya cast again as backward, subversive, a pagan infection to be purged from the body politic. In this light, the ritual violence of the ancient Maya seems almost less savage than the industrialized brutality of the modern state. The ancients sacrificed to feed the gods, to preserve the cosmos. The modern state slaughtered its own citizens to preserve power and protect the wealth of an elite. Yet from this shared history of suffering and resistance, a powerful Maya identity has re-emerged. Today, millions of Maya fight to reclaim their languages, revitalize their traditions, and defend their ancestral lands from deforestation and exploitation. They are scholars, activists, farmers, artists. When a Maya activist resists a corporation seeking to clear a forest, they echo the defiance of ancestors who resisted the Spanish. When a village rejects industrial agriculture and returns to planting traditional maize, the sacred flesh of creation, they perform an act of cultural and spiritual resistance. The story of Maya sexuality and sacrifice is not a lurid footnote of the past. It is part of a vast and sophisticated worldview, a vision of humanity's place in the cosmos that was both brutal and beautiful. It is the story of a civilization that reached staggering heights of science and art, fueled by a covenant written in blood. And it is the story of a people who endured 5 centuries of conquest and atrocity, yet whose spirit refuses to die. The screams that once rose from temple tops have long faded, but if you listen closely, in the prayer murmured in a Chiapan church, in the rustle of maize in a Guatemalan field, you can still hear the echo of their indomitable heart. To truly understand the Maya requires a leap of imagination. We must strip away our own assumptions about the self, the body, the sacred. We live in a world shaped by Abrahamic faiths and the Enlightenment, a world that prizes individual life, personal happiness, the privacy of the body, the separation of church and state. For the classic Maya, such values would have been incomprehensible. Their moral compass was not oriented around the individual, but around the cosmos itself. The highest good was not personal survival, but the maintenance of balance, the fulfillment of humanity's covenant with the gods. In that framework, what we see as ultimate violation, the taking of a human life, could be the ultimate act of devotion. What we view as mutilation was for them a sacred duty, a gateway to the divine. It is a concept that defies our instincts. Our first reaction is to judge, to brand their practices as barbaric. But that refusal to see the world on their terms is itself a form of intellectual colonization. A more difficult and far more unsettling approach is to ask, what did this worldview achieve? The answer is staggering. For more than a millennium, the Maya created one of the most advanced civilizations on Earth. Their desire to track the heavens and serve their gods drove them to invent a mathematical system that included zero, developed independently of the old world. Their need to preserve dynasties and ritual obligations gave rise to the most complex writing system of the ancient Americas. Their cosmic dramas of sacrifice and renewal demanded stages worthy of the gods, and so they built an architecture of breathtaking scale and astronomical precision. The pyramids of Tikal, towering more than 200 feet above the jungle canopy, were never just tombs or temples. They were man-made sacred mountains, cosmic stages where rituals renewed the world itself. Maya cities were maps of the universe, their very layout a mirror of sacred geography, and their art, the murals of Bonampak, the carvings of Palenque, the expressive ceramics sealed in tombs, was never decoration. It was revelation, a way to make the invisible world visible, a way to bind religion, politics, and power into images of divine truth. Even the bloodletting scenes that unsettle us today were, to them, visions of beauty because they revealed reality as it truly was. This forces a difficult reckoning. Civilization is not a clean progression from savagery to enlightenment. It is contradiction. A culture can achieve brilliance in mathematics, astronomy, and art while also embracing violence at its core. For the Maya, those two things were inseparable. And before we judge, we should reflect on ourselves. We recoil at human sacrifice, yet our own history is drenched in blood spilled for gods, nations, and ideologies. We dismiss their ritual violence, but we consume it daily in our entertainment, and we live in a world where technology has made killing impersonal, efficient, industrial. The Maya offered hearts to stone altars. We sacrifice lives on the altars of profit, progress, and power. Have we escaped the paradigm or only disguised it? Replace the obsidian blade with the drone strike, the market, the machine. This is not to excuse the past, but to face a truth, creation, and destruction. Spirituality and violence live side by side in all human societies. The Maya are a mirror, and their reflection unsettles us. They show us that what we take as natural, universal, inevitable, our values, our worldview, is only one possibility among many. They reveal the dangerous power of belief, a belief that made them builders of wonders, but also demanded rivers of blood. Their story warns us of what happens when cosmic duty outweighs human life, when devotion edges into fanaticism. And so, we are left with ruins, silent stones, scattered fragments, whispers carried by their descendants. We can never truly know what it felt like to be them, to see the world through their eyes, to taste the ecstasy of sacrifice. But if we dare to look directly into that abyss, without flinching, we may learn something profound about the full range of what it means to be human. The jungle has swallowed their temples, but the questions they raise about God, humanity, and the cost of devotion still linger. So pause here, in the shadow of the blood-soaked pyramid. We've seen the king pierce his flesh, the queen drag thorns through her tongue, the captive's heart torn beating from his chest. We've traced the logic, the terrible cosmic necessity that drove it all. We've seen how this system built a civilization and how it may have helped undo it. But there is a chamber we haven't entered yet, a space even more intimate than the sacrificial altar. To go further, we must ask not just what they did or why. We must ask how. How did they endure it? How did a young nobleman press a stingray's spine into the most sensitive part of his body without collapsing into madness? How did a king or queen transform unbearable agony into communion with the divine? The answer is not toughness, not brainwashing. The answer lies in a psychosocial technology of staggering sophistication. They learn to dismantle the self, to use pain not as a wall, but as a door. And to understand this, we must first enter their world. For the Maya, the jungle was no backdrop of trees and beasts. It was alive, saturated with divinity. The great ceiba tree was not a symbol of the cosmos. It was the cosmos. Its roots reaching down into Xibalba, the watery underworld. Its trunk standing in the middle world of human life. Its branches stretching into the 13 heavens above. The jaguar was not an animal. It was a living axis of power, a being that prowled between worlds. The jaguar was the god of the underworld, the avatar of the night sun on its perilous journey through darkness. The cenotes, those deep, water-filled sinkholes, were not just wells. They were mouths of the underworld, portals to the dead and the gods of creation and destruction. Every mountain was an ancestor. Every cave a doorway to another world. For the Maya, there was no line between natural and supernatural, The world was alive, sentient, always demanding response. It spoke, and to hear it, one had to learn its language. It was ecstasy, trance, trauma, a personal universe in miniature. The head was heaven, the heart the sun. Blood flowed like sacred rivers and rains, bones were stone, hair was forest. Sexual organs carried the same generative force as the act that birthed creation itself. To cut the body was to cut the cosmos. To draw blood from the penis was to fertilize the cosmic field. To pierce the tongue, the organ of speech, was to give voice to the ancestors. This was not metaphor, it was literal truth. And if the body was cosmos, then altering consciousness meant altering reality itself. Here entered the chemical keys. The Maya were master pharmacologists, with encyclopedic knowledge of the psychoactive world around them. They brewed balshay, a honeyed drink steeped with hallucinogenic bark. They ate psilocybin mushrooms, the flesh of the gods. They drew power from the venom of toads rich in baphotonin, smoked wild tobacco so potent it could hurl the mind from the body, consumed morning glory seeds laced with LSA, a cousin to LSD. None of these were recreational. They were medicines, tools of sacred navigation. In the hands of priests, shamans, and nobles, they dissolved the ego, unmoored the soul, and opened the mind to the terror and the glory of the spirit world. But the greatest catalyst was not chemical. It was pain. Their psycho-spiritual technology followed a sequence. Fasting, sensory deprivation, then the hallucinogens, breaking perception into fragments, chanting, drums, torchlight, movement layer after layer of disorientation. And at the peak of this trance came the blade. The sting, the searing, undeniable agony. For a mind already loosened from ordinary reality, pain ceased to be sensation. It became revelation, the voice of the god, the touch of the ancestor, the raw current of the cosmos itself. Pain was the final key, the one that shattered the last defenses of the self, allowing the initiate to merge with divinity. The scream was not just pain, it was the sound of the barrier between worlds tearing open. In that moment, they were no longer king, queen, or mortal. They were a portal, a living gateway through which the cosmos roared. This ecstasy, this breaking, was the root of royal power. Any ruler could claim descent from gods, but a ruler who bled in public, entered trance, and emerged with prophecy from the vision serpent had proved divinity. His authority was inscribed in blood on his own flesh for all to see. Now step down from the temple peak. Walk the stone causeways into the city, into the homes of the common people. For this worldview, this terrifying union of body, blood, and cosmos was not confined to kings. It was the air everyone breathed, the soil their lives grew from. The farmer who rose before dawn to tend his milpa maize, beans, squash, did not see himself as a laborer. He too was part of the same cosmic drama. When he pressed a kernel of maize into the soil, he was not planting a seed. He was burying a fragment of the maize god's body, surrendering it to the underworld with faith it would be reborn. As the sun was reborn each morning after its perilous descent into night, so too the seed would rise again. His world was ordered by the same sacred calendar that governed the king's rituals. The 260-day Tzolk'in told him when to plant, when to harvest, when to marry, when to offer the small but vital rites that kept his family and his crops in harmony with the cosmos. He may not have wielded a stingray spine or an obsidian blade, but the farmer had his own tools for honoring the sacred pact. A drop of blood from his earlobe or finger mingled with corn seeds before planting, a personal offering to fertilize the earth. He burned copal incense at a small household altar, its fragrant smoke carrying prayers skyward, a humble echo of the great temple plumes. Even his sex life was woven into the cosmic fabric. Intercourse was not just procreation. It was creation itself, a mirror of the divine act that birthed the universe. But it was also perilous. Semen was life force, finite and sacred. To waste it, or to break ritual purity with sex during fasting or sacred preparation, was to weaken oneself and endanger the community. Warriors, for instance, were bound to celibacy before battle, conserving every spark of vital energy for combat. This gave Maya sexuality its duality. On one hand, celebrated in art and myth with phallic symbols and fertility imagery. On the other, constrained by strict codes of abstinence at crucial times. A sexuality of extremes, swinging between sacred duty and dangerous taboo. For women, the body was equally bound to the sacred. Menstruation was a liminal state, a crossing between worlds. Menstrual blood was potent, feared, and revered, and women were often secluded, so its power would not disrupt warriors or priests preparing for ritual. Yet this power was not evil. It tied them to the moon goddess Ixchel, patron of fertility, childbirth, floods, and destruction. A woman's highest calling was to bear children, bringing new souls into the world for gods and community. Childbirth was her battlefield, her supreme sacrifice. Mortality rates were brutal. A woman who died in childbirth was honored as a warrior fallen in combat, her spirit joining the sun on its daily journey across the sky. Even the household was a cosmos in miniature. A simple wattle and daub hut with a thatched roof held profound symbolism. The central hearth was the axis mundi, the heart around which family life revolved. Ancestors were buried beneath the floor, not neglect, but reverence, ensuring the dead remained present to guide and protect the living. Life unfolded as a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, reflected in the sacred home, in the sacred city, in the sacred universe itself. But such intimacy with the divine carried constant anxiety. The gods were not shepherds. They were powerful, unpredictable, and demanding. Illness, a failed crop, a dangerous birth, these were not chance. They were signs of imbalance, failures of ritual, debts owed to gods or spirits. Every act was charged with spiritual weight, weaving cloth, preparing food, raising children. Each could court favor or disaster. Amulets guarded against the evil eye. Incantations shielded infants from night spirits. Offerings were left at caves and crossroads, homes of earth deities. Life was exhausting, lived on the knife's edge, between divine blessing and divine wrath. And when we walk among the silent ruins of Maya cities, it is easy to forget this. We see the grand temples, the observatories, the monuments, and imagine lives of brilliance and splendor. But for the vast majority living in their shadow, life was not just a struggle for food and shelter. It was a struggle for spiritual survival. Their story reminds us that the greatest civilizations are not only built on stone and mortar, but on the daily labor, fervent beliefs, and quiet fears of countless ordinary people. People who lived in awe of gods, who were both creators and predators.